Hello viewers, welcome back to yet another edition of the Women's Show here on Civic Space TV. Today's topic, we are discussing about land evictions in light especially of the large-scale land investments. So the people who are going to help us shed light onto this topic and really explain it more are my lovely panelists for today. I will let them introduce themselves.
Okay. Hello viewers, I'm called Gloria-Programs. I work with Food Rights Alliance as the Programs Manager, Food Governance, and I'm also a lawyer and a women's rights activist. I welcome you to this show.
We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello viewers, I'm by the names of Nivatiti Nandujja. I'm a women's rights activist and currently working with Oxfam in Uganda. I'm humbled to be here.
We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
So just to give us some brief background on the topic we're discussing today. So I think most of us have heard about the several land evictions going on in the country. This has been happening for the past, I think, 2 decades or so. In 2008, in Amuru district, we saw women stripped down and protest the eviction from their communal land. So one of the arguments the government gave that, you see, this land was empty, so therefore any public land that is empty is basically ours and we have the right to give it out. But the people are like, look, this land is empty because of the war, and traditionally it is ours. It's for communal use. You have no right to take away what is ours, what is community land. In Mubende, we also saw a similar incident where people were evicted from their land, and it was mile land. And we know and perhaps our dear panelists will take us through the nitty-gritties of mile land and who is a bona fide occupant and who is the owner. So the argument of the people who were evicted was that we are bona fide occupants and the law legally allows us to stay on this land, even if there is a private owner of that land. The private owner has no right to chase us away. So we've had these different narratives in different cases, more or less the same, whether it's mile land, whether it's community land. Now, today's topic, we're basically looking at another dynamic of it. Well, as people talk about the evictions of both men and women in general, we want to look at how do these evictions particularly affect women? Because most of the time when we're looking at the resistances, for example, let me say the Amuru protests, the first time we saw women at the forefront saying that, you know, you can't take away our land. And we know usually land issues in our community pertain to men. So we want to look at how are women affected? What are the issues around women's land rights? So I will start with you, Gloria. Why is it for the past 2 decades we have been having these land evictions? Is it because people do not know which land they own? What are the dynamics around land ownership? Why is it every now and then we are having, oh, you took my land, oh, this one is encroaching on my land? What are the dynamics? Why are land evictions becoming so rampant these days?
Okay, thank you so much, Agnes. I think the main issue around land eviction is the urge for development that the country is having right now. You do appreciate that the world is growing so fast. And we have seen influx of investors in the country, where all of them are aiming at particularly a specific development to undertake within the country. And in our laws, especially the Investment Code Act, the government have a provision where the investors can be given incentives. Incentives are ways of attracting investors. We can give them tax waivers, and some of them we are giving them land. And once land comes into play, we have to look around and see which land is available, either out of the public land or any other land where, if we are talking of extractives, then we're looking at where are the deposits of the minerals and or whatever it is, like the oil that is happening in the Albertine. So you find sometimes the evictions come as a must thing because the one of El Batain, there is oil under the ground, and you cannot say, let's go and evict people in, let's get Karamoja where there is no oil. So definitely they will rush where there is the oil, and then that will cause that eviction. And then there are other instances where they are looking at plantation agriculture. The Mubende case you have mentioned, people were evicted because they wanted to plant coffee. And so at the end of it all, the investors say, okay, this land is going to be suitable for this, and government says, yes, that is where we have our land and we can take over. So we are seeing eviction coming in because the government is so much in rush to develop the country and giving out these incentives to the people. But at the end of the day, people are already settled on this land, and it becomes a must for them to be evicted. And that is where the main problem is coming in. So much as we welcome the development, but the laws are very clear under the Constitution that when you're giving away land to the people, I mean to investors, it has to be done with the prior compensation to the people who are being evicted. Unfortunately for Uganda, the evictions are done when probably we don't even have enough money to compensate the people. And the compensation comes in, but it's not adequate as the people expect, because once people hear that government is taking up the land, you expect a lot of money coming out of it. But this monies come in because they're calculated at the market rate of the land in that area. If an acre of land is going at 500,000, that is what the government bases on to value that land. So at the end of the day, people are left with less compensation coming in. So we are in that rush, but how prepared is the country to do the investment vis-a-vis recognizing the rights of the people who settle on this land is the question that I think the country needs to deal with. Right now, we are working on National Development Plan 3 of the country, but the main theme of it is looking at industrialization, agro-industrialization. But what does that mean for the country? It's still going to go back into large-scale acquisition of land from the people. So as we go forward, I think we shall have to digest on, is the country ready to receive investment vis-a-vis protecting the rights of the people, and more so women that settle, that use this land, that identify with it, that it's kind of a way of socializing. Land is not just tilling for women, it is so much more than just tilling the ground. So as we go forward, that is a question that we shall need to answer.
But, and maybe Nivatiti will help us answer this. But when we talk about compensation, many people will say that, if you're not satisfied with the compensation, you can always go to court, know. And we have seen, people go to court and they are awarded. And really, the law protects you that if you cannot agree on the compensation, really, they cannot evict you. We have seen government projects that have stalled for a very long time because they cannot agree on what, with the owner, what sort of compensation is adequate for them. And we have even seen government change the routes of roads because they have not been able to agree. So in that way, wouldn't you say that the law tries to protect people?
Thank you so much.
Just stubborn people who don't want to be compensated, maybe.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's critical to appreciate the fact that land is owned by different categories of people for different purposes. And you bear witness that land is a very powerful tool. And some people call it evil to a certain extent, because you find that we have different forms of land tenure in the country. We have milo land, freehold, leasehold, name it. But you find that there's an intersectionality of power in terms of ownership. Who owns this land? Who is it registered? In whose names? Who is getting the leases? So the bigger question is, as the law is trying to provide for the legal protection where you can go to court and seek justice, majority of the women are vulnerable and often don't have money to access the courts. So as you're talking about compensation, you're putting a vulnerable woman vis-a-vis a corporate or a company, multilateral company that has a lot of money. And so what does this mean in terms of ownership? Okay? You find that majority of the women derive their livelihood from the land. And where there is a challenge in terms of eviction, They're the majority that are affected. So the upper scenario is a unique one. And it was a strong message by the women saying that you're taking our identity, our livelihood, and our source of income. So you find that as you're doing the compensation, there are many things you have to take into consideration. How are these people going to be settled? Are they appreciated? First of all, even the level of awareness, okay? Some people start evicting as soon as someone is going to bed in the night. And people are not aware, they're not complying with the existing legal and policy frameworks. By the time you know, someone's, structures are off the land. So what does this mean in terms of development as well as protecting the rights of vulnerable women and girls in the communities? So these are critical issues that we are grappling with. And as we are looking at the different land reforms currently going on, where is the voice of the woman? Majority, they are not at the table of decision making. So the voices there are mainly not gender sensitive in terms of the terminologies. What kind of compensation are you giving? For instance, if you are to look at the list of people being compensated, they'll ask who is the head of the household. And if it's a woman, there are challenges that come with that. Okay? They'll ask you who is the head of the household, then you try to identify yourself. They'll ask for so many documents which could be discouraging, and at times they're technical for the women to apprehend. So there are critical issues that we need to reflect through as we are doing a lot of development, road construction, factories, among others. The lives of vulnerable people are affected in different magnitudes. Yeah.
Maybe I can add something to that. When you're talking again of the compensation, like she hinted, compensation comes on ownership, okay? Which ownership most women don't have. Because at the end of the day, if it is a family land, then the head of the family. And if it is an individual land, still the head of the family, the man who married the woman and brought on the land. But then, again, the other thing that is compensated on the land, apart from the land itself, is the crops on the land. So when it comes to crops, you realize that we have cassava, we have sweet potatoes, we have tomatoes, we have this dodo that women plant. But when you look at compensation lists, most of the crops that women hold on to for daily meals, okay, are not on the list. They don't put this dodo that you're having there. The gobes are not there. You're going to find cassava, which was planted by the family because that is commercial. They need money from it. And so the man has to hold on to that one. That is the experience I've seen as I was working on this kind of project. So at the end of the day, what a woman holds on to is left out. And so when large-scale land-based investments come with eviction of such a kind, she's totally stripped off what she has. And when you're talking of the process, what happened in Amuru, I think the women are showing you that when you take this line, you're stripping us naked. Literally, I can't sit watching my children sleep hungry when I had the opportunity to cultivate. Fine, it could be government land, whatever it is. But we say the land in Uganda belongs to the people of Uganda. So is there a better way government can find ways of maybe settling the communities that are affected somewhere? In fact, I don't even believe in compensation as money, because money can be wasted. We have seen in the Albertine, the men that got compensated, they fed dogs on alcohol, they married more women, and so the housewives were left with the children, and they were wondering what happened to the money. In registration, they registered all of them, but the money comes in, and then the man grabs it and runs away with it. So the woman is left. So indirectly, when you take my land, you're stripping me naked. I'm not going to have what to feed. I can't feed my family. I'm not going to have my friends at the end of the day when you displace me. Maybe where I was settled once, I had access to water that is nearby. Okay, my church is nearby, but displacing me means I have to start looking for other sources of water somewhere else. So that is how much women are attached to land. Both men and women are affected. But on a scale, you
Women
realize that
affected
women
more.
get more affected, because if you marry, and in fact in Albertine, other men crossed over to West Nile and left the women on the land here struggling, you understand?
Yeah.
We had widows that were literally supposed to inherit land, but the in-laws came back and said, look here, you crossed without land, so you can't say this is your land. We paid off cows on you, so pack your clothes and go. So taking away land from a woman, you're stripping her naked. And that is the exact thing the people in Moro tried to show the people right now. So the government, we have what we call the AU guidelines, African Union guidelines on large-scale land-based investment. Themselves, they came to realize that with the so much investments and investors coming to Africa, we are being left without land to sustain everyone. So at the end of the day, they've passed that guideline to look into, it has like 7 principles, among which is looking at ensuring the rights of women and children to promote equality. You understand? And for them in the guideline, they're discussing it at the angle of food security. So when you see us coming on board and saying we have a right to adequate food, we are meaning enough accessibility of it. I can't access food if I don't have land and I don't have the money. And you know, majority of the communities affected have been communities that don't even have money, you know. So you cannot tell them they will go and buy from a supermarket or go and buy from the market. I mean, I can sit and wake up, go and get food from the garden, and it will be enough for everyone, other than looking for like over 2,000, which is too much for someone in a village to access. So the guideline is basically waking up Africans. Wake up. Your land you're giving for investment, but hey, how about your women? How about the children? How about the community? Are they feeding? Are the cultural rights being respected? You understand? So I think that is the direction that we need to take going forward as a country, implementing the guideline. That is the only way investment can be balanced. I always make a joke and say that time will come when we are going to see big buildings in the country and we say Uganda has really developed, yet underneath we are having so many poor people and landless people. So the GDP develops, but the community are actually hungry and very poor. And you say country has developed.
What's the GDP?
So what is happening to human development?
What's the relevance of the GDP?
That is it. That is it.
So. But then maybe I'll take the conversation back to Nivatiti. The guidelines will be many, and the law has tried somehow. Although I also ask lawyers, it becomes complicated now, because whereas you want to, and we have had these conversations, right, from, let me say, letting women having an interest in family land, to they talk about, let me say, property that is used by the family. We're trying, the law, at least the lawmakers are trying to make sure that at least women's rights are reserved, even in a patriarchal society that does not allow them to own land. But then the biggest question in the room has always been that you do not want to dispossess people who rightfully own land, which in most cases are men. That some people will see it as if you are taking, you're being a Robin Hood of the sorts. You're taking from the rich and giving to the poor, which should be, which is illegal. It's almost like you want to use the law to steal. That's how some people see it, to steal from men and give to women. But at the end of the day, when you see, and we're talking about the contribution, we've talked about this, women's unpaid work, care work, and how most of the time they're the ones utilizing the land, you know. And even when we go to our cultures, you see that Choli culture at least allows women to use land in order to facilitate the family. So
actually, not only owning, but initially, way back, women were determinants of boundary conflicts in Acholi land, which was a very good practice. So in terms of land management, we have very good progressive culture norms, beliefs and practices, but we also have bad ones. So most times the bad ones position women and girls in a very inferior position. So they are not supposed to voice. You're supposed to be in the kitchen. but you're supposed to have user rights on the land.
Yeah.
But in terms of selling the proceeds,
You can.
that's where the problem comes.
Exactly.
So the issue around majority of the women not owning land registered in their names so that they can, you know, give it away as fully consenting adults becomes problematic. So in terms of managing customary land, tenureship, and protecting the rights of women, it still remains contentious. Because in terms of compensation, the person they're going to compensate, ideally, they'll look for the head of the household, that's the man.
Yeah.
And so if a woman is a widow and is the, you know, head in this family, at times they're not very much recognized. They'll ask supporting, yes, but even their cultural practices, they don't recognize a woman as having the right to own land in their individual capacity, making decisions, you know, at the right space. So issues around culture, practices still continue, but for a fact that women bear the burden of care highly. And this was evident during the lockdown. We witnessed a lot of gender-based violence because of people didn't have basic items like food. So the women had to trek long distances to fetch firewood, you know, look after the sick. So the burden was quite heavy. And so this has a connection to development we are looking at as a country. So respecting and upholding the rights of women in terms of land ownership and rights therein is important. But let me come to the issue around access to justice. You find that there are contradictions in the existing legal and policy frameworks. And so issues around law reform are critical for us, but they also need to be quite gender sensitive. As you're looking at compensation, what is the mechanism you're using? Okay. Is it arbitration first? Because the law provides for arbitration first. But most times, compensation is not done in a, you know, systematic manner, respecting the rights of all, because you need to hear the voices of all that are affected.
So in the arbitration, are there mechanisms to force people to allow these women on the table? Or we have not yet reached there, we are not yet that progressive? She was talking about guidelines. Are we implementing them as in Uganda?
You see, the arbitration rules and guidelines are in existence. And you're supposed to hear from all sides, okay? So most times, when you hear from the big corporates, most times their voice overshadows the one of the vulnerable people. And we're talking about women in the communities. And so having that fair platform where power is demystified is important, where a woman can speak out on the issues affecting them. For instance, if you're displacing them from the family and their matrimonial home, what else are you providing for them? The scenario of APA was really, really gross. And we really got concerned for a fact that women were losing their, you know, lives. This was their livelihood. Some were affected in different magnitudes psychologically. Until now, in a Choli culture, for a woman to, you know, undress, it shows that they've unearthed all the power they have. So it was a power, you know, communication for policymakers, decision makers on land management to realize that their rights have to be protected. And so if they took it serious, justice would have prevailed and they would have been reinstated onto their land. Yeah.
Well, I heard that they came to a consensus with government, though the people are still uncertain of how long it will last. For now, the Madvans have stopped encroaching. I'm not sure. Last I heard that was in 2018. So that's the last time I heard about that case, but we are still seeing. But do you think it has had any impact on legislation or policy, that particular incident? Has it woken up people to a realization that, oh, we need to look at women when we are legislating some of these laws, there need to be these reforms? Are some of the reforms that we are seeing from that particular as a result of that kind of resistance that the women put up?
I think there are different shifts that need to be made. As you're looking at the policy, what is the practice? Okay? The practice must rhyme with the legal frameworks. As you're talking about evictions, what is the legal framework you are using to evict them? If you're talking about compensation, is there fairness in all this judgment? But you find that once the eviction happens, there are issues to be taken care of. For instance, the people in the communities there, they're still affected psychologically, but who is providing the psychosocial support? Okay? Other people lost their lives. They're in court seeking justice. That's also a journey. So are we seeing transformation in terms of progressive decision making, in terms of ownership, protection, and the rights of the vulnerable people we are talking about? Yeah, it's critical.
So let me go to you, Gloria. You talked about the guidelines, but as Nivatiti has said that there are law reforms taking place. And I'll take us to the most contentious one, that certain state actors said, you know what, one of the things that we can do to solve this whole land issue is to ban Milo land. I mean, it is a very complicated system. There is a bona fide occupant, then there is a private owner, then there are chibanja. There are so many terminologies around this particular issue. Let's just get rid of it once and for all. And, you know, we call it a day, and people own land. The legitimate owner should be the one to own land. Or maybe we decide that the bona fide occupant is now the person we are issuing land titles to and is the one owning land. What do you think about that?
You see, in the first place, evictions in the country is not only happening on Milo land. That is the beginning point, okay? Amuro is not under Milo land. That is customary pure.
But maybe I can say that it can handle the issues in Buganda, and then we will get another solution for the ones in other parts of the country.
Now, evictions on Milo land, you know, my experience on Milo land has been that we do have the Kabaka's land, and we do have the private Milos.
Yes.
And it's on the private Milo that I think issues are happening so much, okay?
But we saw Kabaka also had issues with tenants sometime back.
Yes, that is true.
There is
challenges
across the different land tenures.
Everywhere, in all the land tenures, because even the freehold tenure we are having multiple titles sometimes. But now I'm talking about this one of Milo. What happens is that the only reason why a person can be evicted out of the Milo land is when you fail to pay the ground nominal rent, okay? The district land boards determine the ground nominal rent. Where the district have not determined it, then it is, you go to the Ministry of Lands, then the minister determines for a particular district. But the challenge that we have got with in so many communities is that we don't know these landlords. People don't know their landlords, okay? So when you ask them, why aren't you paying the ground nominal rent, that we don't know this person. And I think it is a play that the landlords themselves are playing, a game that they are playing so that they are not found and they don't do what? They don't pay, they don't be paid.
So don't you agree with government that we should get rid of the landlord?
I think it is, because why would we leave the entire village to one person? Why? People are going to be landless. People need to survive. And you're just one person. You're not even using this land. I mean, you have survived with this land without it. So now here you come up and you're just giving it to one investor. And majority of the Ugandans are going to be left hungry on the street. So at the end of it all, it's true the bona fide occupants are protected. They can have an option of either, I mean, because even the law says when you want to take over this land from them, you give them the option of either buying off their spaces, they buy your interest from the land. If they can't buy it, you negotiate. You share the land with them. If not, they even have a right to acquire certificate of occupancy on your land, okay? But what has happened with our landlords, they've always come in a wake of a day, get up and go. The procedure for eviction under the law is that go to court first. Inform the court you want to evict them. And because they are not paying ground nominal rent, the court will issue notice to them to show cause as to why they should not be evicted. And I know most of their reasons are going to be, we don't know our landlord, which is something understandable, because if you hide there, you're hiding yourself, I will not even know you, okay? So if the court finds it's reasonable, they give them time to negotiate and see their ways out, okay? But for some reason, And the court the law looks at a 6 months period for all this to happen, you know. But for some reason, our landlords just wake up and the following morning get up and go. We have seen people being given 1 week's notice, 1 month's notice, so it's at their disposal. I don't really want to fault the law. The law is very clear, but whoever breaks the law does it with impunity because they know they're dealing with people who are weak because money is power. These ones don't have money, they're very weak. Talking of the Mubende case, that is how the evictions happened. By the way, among those who are not ready to settle in the Mubende case, which has taken more than 20 years, okay, in court, some of them even had their titles on the same land. You understand? So the landlord comes in and the evictions takes place. People go to court. We are talking of access to justice, but how ready are our judicial officers in protecting our rights as bona fide occupants on the land? I mean, the judges do know this, the laws that are in place that they could have used to protect the people. But we are either adamant to protect them because they don't have the money to push forward, or else the urge for investment, like we said before, because these investors, when they get on your land, definitely are paying you more than what a community person will end up giving you. So the issue of Milo land, we also have what we call a land fund, okay, that is always allocated to Uganda Land Commission that holds all public lands in trust for the government of Uganda, who also hold land in trust for the people of Uganda. But the landlords are being paid. That is what their ministerial policy statements always tells us. They keep paying the landlords. But what keeps disturbing...
Like government paying the landlords?
Yes, the money is meant to pay off landlords, to buy their interest of the land. Then so they leave the community on the land. Okay. Yes, that is what is happening. But
it's functional? Is it?
That is what disturbs me. It is functional, and you keep hearing some of these people are being paid off, but
evicting people.
They continue.
One person is given quite a huge chunk of money.
Yes.
In the interest of
in billions, they're paid. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the government needs to wake up at this point and tells all the landlords, hold there. We are going to pay you. Maybe this year we shall pay a few. Next year will be the next, like that, so that these people are not displaced. Honestly, if we don't have a deliberate intention to protect the community and the poor person of the society, then I think time will come when the poor will be on the street, eating on the street. We are going to call the Ugandans landless, yet we have several pieces of land.
And it's under one person.
That is it. So it's not just about the Milo tenure, but all tenures have issues. But in regard to Milo, it needs to be deliberate effort by the government to stop the landlords. Don't evict, we shall compensate you.
But also we've had several commissions being established by government and other stakeholders, directives of the president, to investigate issues around land evictions. And there are reports and recommendations that come through.
True.
So when we see a new twist of the conversation in terms of the Milo conversation, it's, I think, diversionary to the extent that what needs to happen is to look at who is affected in all these land issues, the land evictions.
But then they would also argue that in those reports, and maybe you could, for the mutuawancies of us who do not understand these complexities that come with the land issue, I would say, but this Milo thing was just a couple of looters who at the time, our colonial masters were in positions of power. They will say that if we're just to look at the Milo tenure system again, and these conversations have come, I think we have had them. Most of the time I see the spokesperson of the kingdom coming up and saying, no, this. Yeah. But as our history, as we are taught in our history books, that land in Buganda was communal. It was for everyone, held in trust by the Kabaka. But not that he had particularly ownership over it, but he just supervised it and managed it on behalf of the people. Then in one day, in 1900, in the year of 1900, the greedy chiefs took advantage of the fact that the Kabaka at that time was a very young boy, not able to perhaps protect his people. They decide to make a deal with the British officers and then take possession of people's land and divide it amongst themselves. That it's a historical injustice and maybe it is time that we correct it. Don't they have a point in that regard? Or maybe we have the wrong history.
Yeah.
They do.
Actually, the issue around land is a political question. And when you see the conversations between the land owned by the Kabaka, the genesis of land, it's a historical journey. And so what is happening, we need to question whether it's a shift taking us back or moving forward. And so the issue that really needs to be interrogated further is whose interests are we advancing? Is it for the big companies or the ordinary woman there? Mwana omchala wa wanse. Alima kutaka, like they have to get a livelihood out of that land. Okay? So having the conversation on Milo is important. But I think for us, the women, it's critical to interrogate where is the position.
Who is the conversation for?
Yes, who is the, I mean, the conversation is only talking about some people acquiring land for investment. How about the ordinary person who's been deriving their livelihood from there, their identity? They have the burial grounds, and you have to evict all this from their land. So you find that conflicts, trauma is coming along with issues around compensation, evictions, and all that. And so with all due fairness, I think justice needs to be delivered in a very progressive way, looking at the interest of who is affected, but also not compromising development at the interest of vulnerable people, most times, which is the case. Yeah.
I'll go back to you, Gloria. Why is it that we take 10 years to... Where is the justice in that? They say that justice delayed is denied.
Yeah.
Like, why is it 20 years for that Mubende case to be? Is it because they cannot find court documents? Do the case files disappear? The judges, they went to adjudicate on the case. What's going on? There are cases that have spent 40 years.
True.
People who even brought them have even died and they're still there. What's going on?
Their grandchildren are following up the cases.
Yes. That's absolutely ridiculous. What's going on?
That's why I want to agree with her that land is a political question, especially where investment is involved. Several times we have heard our president saying, "You enemies of progress. You want to frustrate my investors." You understand? So when such things are coming into play, then you look at the angle of the justice. Whom is it going to be in favor of? Okay. So I do know that court have the ability to settle a case as fast as they can. Much as we talk of money issues, funding to the judicial, but there are issues that are critical where livelihoods are at stake. Livelihood not of only one person, but thousands of community members are at stake that needs to be dealt with immediately. For me, it should have actually been a priority. And when I see such judges sit in court and are still adjourning these cases, because there are so many reasons as why cases can be adjourned, okay? It could be your lawyer is not there, and they'll say, okay, wait next time. And then a judge dealing with such a case, instead of saying, come back tomorrow or next week, is going to give you up to next year. So you keep wondering why all this kind of play. It's actually a very hard question to answer why cases are being delayed. And I don't want really to fault it on finances, because you're getting salary every month.
But they are not enough.
You're getting salary, you're getting allowances, judges are not enough. I don't want to really deal with that. I mean, you can even appoint mediators to deal with this case. Like she was talking of arbitration, but mediation could have also worked. But where you see things are playing games, then it's a different story. I feel like that Mubende case is just more of playing games around. You can't have up to 20 years. We were dealing with one of the community lead person that was connecting people. As I talk, he's in and out of prison, you know, every time he's arrested over that same issue. should you invite him and bring him to Kampala to share his ordeal as a on behalf of the community? The next thing you realize he's arrested. Why is he being arrested? Who is arresting him? You understand? So it's really a very big question to answer. That's why I still insist, if a state is interested in protecting its people, it has to undertake that deliberate effort to do it. But where you want to value the development, I welcome the development, we need it. But if you want to welcome it on behalf, again, at the expense of the rights of the community, fine, we can have all the industries that we need, but your people will be on the street.
That's very unfortunate.
That is it.
Nivatiti, I want to go to something that was in the Oxfam, yeah? Am I getting Oxfam report?
Yes.
And it talked about militarization of mining that is happening, at least in third world countries. I think in Uganda we have seen with the occupation of places like Karamoja, Kasanda, you find where there's a gold deposit. Suddenly the place is occupied by military barracks overnight, just crop up, and we have seen displacement in these areas where there is minerals. We're looking at the Albertine region that basically was recently the discovery of oil. We have seen the report that came out, talked about displacement of thousands of people, that even when they were trying to earn from this new investment that has come in their country, they're seeing foreigners taking up even the commonest jobs that they thought as the young people they could get, or people in that region. But for me, I want to talk about the militarization, what Oxfam termed as the militarization of mining, and how it is affecting the community, but especially women. What do you have to say about that?
I think when you talk about militarization, it's kind of broad. But as our existing legal and policy framework provide, there are various institutions that are mandated to protect the rights of citizens in the country. And so that mandate is derived from the Constitution. And so issues around security, issues around safety of the citizens is important, also in the extractive sector. You'll bear witness with me that the extractive and mining sector is progressive across Africa. And so there are interests here for both investors as well as the government, as well as the ordinary people. So you find that majority of the women in this extractive sector are small artisan miners, or they are doing casual work within the extractive sector to earn a living. So most times those are the people that are mainly affected, because once you evict everyone out of the mining area, majority of the women will be left jobless, because they're the majority of the small artisan miners. They don't have certificates, and their rights will be left in limbo at that point. Yeah.
Okay. Let us. So our time is fast spent. So in maybe about 2 minutes, give us a way forward. How do we solve this problem? How do we help the women out there? How do we make sure that women's access to land is seen, is legislated on, that there is progress?
First, like we said, our laws have no problem. The problem are there, but minor. When it comes to acquisition of land, the compensation issue is there dealt with. But I think what has to be done, because first and foremost, compensation lists come right from the district land board, okay? So in the list of compensation, all crops has to be considered, especially the women's crop, the small ones that they grow, okay? That has to be considered in the compensation list. When government is valuing land, looking at market rate, I think is not a fair deal. Because like we said, you're relating with land, just not a land that you're working on, but it's your identity, it's your area of socialization, it's so much attachment to it, okay? So beyond the value of land, we should put along everything that I'm going to lose out of this land. Okay? That is what government need to deliberately take into play. At the same time, I would actually advise our government that it should be compensation of land for land, not even money for land to begin with. Because when you do it as land for land, I can get my 5 million here, but where I'm relocating, I will not be able to acquire the same, you know, piece of land in the same size, you know. But where government is taking people, now here you are, but we have oil on your land, go to the other area where there is no oil, maybe there's government land, and we deposit, we resettle you there. That is going to leave all of us with land and enough. So that is what government should look at if at all we are to move development and people at this same level. Yeah.
Teacher, let's
Thank
1 minute wrap up.
Thank you so much. I think the issue around public interest litigation comes at the fore, where vulnerable people need to be protected, their rights upheld by the state as well as the corporates, among others. So issues around land eviction, how much is being compensated, needed to be looked at in a very fair and just manner. And this goes to the root of the judges being quite sensitive in adjudicating over cases on land management and eviction. So where eviction can be stayed as mediations are going on, I think that should be prioritized by all stakeholders in the interest of protecting the livelihood of majority of the people in the country, but also not to render the ordinary citizen landless in their own country. Yeah.
So thank you so much. As you can see, there's a lot that we need to cover. There's a lot that we need to do in regards of women's rights and access to land. So thank you so much for listening to us. I hope that we have picked some pointers and maybe we'll be able to use them in the community when it comes to all those who are facing land evictions and issues to do with land. So thank you so much for joining us. Catch us again, same time, same day on the Women's Show, Civic Space TV. You can follow us on our social media handles, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Bye-bye.